The night Amara was disowned began like any other difficult evening in the Bello mansion. But none of them knew that before midnight, everything would change forever. Amara stood in the center of the enormous living room with her hands tightly clasped together, trying to remain calm while her father, Victor Bello, stared at her with a mixture of anger and disappointment. At 22, Amara had already made a decision that she knew her family would not understand. She had been accepted into one of the country's most respected medical schools through a scholarship, and for her, it was the opportunity she had dreamed about since childhood. She wanted to become a doctor and eventually help people who could not afford proper medical treatment. But Victor had other plans. He wanted her to join Bello Medical Group, attend business meetings, learn the company from the inside, and eventually take a supporting role beside her older brother Daniel. Daniel had always been Victor's favorite. He studied business, traveled with his father, and was already being introduced to important executives as the future leader of the company. Amara had never competed with him, but Daniel constantly treated her dream as if it were childish. That evening, Victor placed a letter from the medical school on the table and asked her if she was serious about leaving the family business behind. Amara quietly explained that she was not rejecting her family. She simply wanted to build a career of her own. Victor's expression hardened. He told her that everything she had was because of the Bello name, and that choosing a scholarship over the family business was an insult. Amara finally found the courage to tell him that she did not want a life chosen for her. Daniel stepped into the argument and accused her of being selfish, claiming that she had always wanted attention. Amara looked at him and reminded him that she had never asked for his position or his father's company. She only wanted the chance to become a doctor. Victor suddenly slammed his hand against the table, making everyone silent. He told Amara that if she walked out of the house, she should never return expecting his support. He said she was throwing away everything the family had built, and that he would no longer consider her his daughter. Amara looked toward her mother, Margaret, hoping she would finally defend her, but Margaret remained silent, unable to challenge Victor. With tears filling her eyes, Amara picked up her small suitcase and walked toward the front door, while Daniel watched with a confident smile, believing she would eventually come back defeated. Amara stepped into the cold night, carrying only one small suitcase, a few clothes, her medical school documents, and the little money she had managed to save from part-time work. Behind her stood the mansion where she had grown up, but for the first time, it no longer felt like home. She walked several blocks before finally stopping beside a quiet street, fighting back tears as she realized she had no idea where she would sleep. She had expected her father to be angry, but she had never imagined he would actually cut her off completely. Still, turning back was not an option. The next morning, Amara found a tiny room in an old building near her university. The room had cracked walls, a narrow bed, and a window that barely closed, but she accepted it because it was all she could afford. Her first months were extremely difficult. She attended medical classes during the day and worked evenings at a small pharmacy to pay for food, transportation, books, and rent. Sometimes she returned home exhausted and studied until 2 in the morning because she knew nobody was going to make her life easier. Meanwhile, her classmates often talked about family vacations, expensive restaurants, and comfortable homes, while Amara quietly counted every coin in her wallet. There were nights when she sat beside her small window, wondering whether her father had been right to say she could not succeed without the Bello name. But whenever those thoughts became too painful, she remembered why she had chosen medicine in the first place. She wanted to help people who had no powerful family behind them. During her clinical training, Amara became especially interested in communities where patients struggled to reach proper medical facilities. She noticed elderly people traveling for hours just to see a doctor and parents delaying treatment because they could not afford private hospitals. Instead of ignoring what she saw, she began spending her free time volunteering at small community clinics. Her professors noticed her dedication, and, before long, Amara became one of the strongest students in her class. She graduated with outstanding results and continued her medical training, refusing to use her family's influence even when people discovered who her father was. She wanted every achievement to belong to her, not the Bello name. After becoming a qualified physician, Amara began working with organizations that provided healthcare to underserved communities. She saw the same problems everywhere: shortages of doctors, expensive treatment, outdated equipment, and families forced to choose between medicine and basic necessities. Rather than simply complain about the system, she began developing a plan for small medical centers that could provide affordable treatment close to where people lived. At first, almost nobody believed her idea could work, but Amara found a few people who shared her vision and started with a single modest clinic, using a small investment and years of savings to get it running. She personally visited patients, trained staff, organized supplies, and spent long hours making sure the clinic served people with dignity. The first year was difficult, but the results began attracting attention. More patients came, local doctors became interested, and small investors started asking questions about the woman who had built a successful healthcare project without the support of her wealthy family. The success of Amara's first medical center slowly changed everything, and within a few years her small idea had grown into something far bigger than she had imagined. She opened additional clinics in communities where proper healthcare was difficult to find, and every new location brought more attention from medical organizations and investors. Amara became known for her determination, but she still kept her personal life private and rarely spoke about the Bello family. She had no interest in reminding people that her father owned one of the country's largest healthcare companies. She wanted her work to speak for itself. Meanwhile, inside Bello Medical Group, the situation was becoming increasingly unstable. Victor Bello had grown older, and his health had begun to decline, forcing him to spend less time at the company. Daniel had taken on more responsibility and was now presenting himself as the future leader of the entire organization. At first, Victor trusted his son completely, but several major projects began failing under Daniel's leadership. Hospital expenses increased, important doctors resigned, and investors started questioning the company's direction. Victor defended Daniel whenever the board raised concerns, believing that his son simply needed more time to prove himself. Then, one afternoon, Victor's longtime lawyer, Mr. Hassan, asked for a private meeting. He arrived carrying an old leather folder that had been stored in the company's legal archives for decades. Victor immediately recognized the signature on the first page. It belonged to his father, the founder of Bello Medical Group. Victor had almost forgotten about the inheritance agreement created years before. As Mr. Hassan explained the document, Victor's confidence disappeared. His father had never intended for the company to automatically pass to the oldest son. Instead, the controlling shares had been placed under a special inheritance arrangement. The heir had to meet specific requirements involving medical knowledge, leadership, and a genuine commitment to improving healthcare. Victor had always assumed Daniel would eventually satisfy those conditions, so he had never taken the agreement seriously. But Mr. Hassan explained that Daniel had failed several of the requirements, while Amara had unknowingly fulfilled every single one through her work. Victor stared at the documents in disbelief when he heard his daughter's name. The daughter he had disowned was legally positioned to become the controlling heir of Bello Medical Group. There was another condition that made the situation even more complicated. Before the shares could be transferred, an independent medical board had to confirm that the chosen heir was qualified to protect the company's healthcare mission. Victor realized that Amara's years of medical training, community work, and successful clinics made her the strongest possible candidate. Daniel would never accept the decision quietly. Victor ordered Mr. Hassan to contact Amara. But when the call finally came, she was shocked to hear that her father wanted to see her again after 7 years of silence. 7 years after walking out of the Bello mansion with a small suitcase, Amara found herself standing outside the headquarters of Bello Medical Group, staring at the enormous glass building where her father had once expected her to build a life she never wanted. She had almost refused to come, especially after learning that Victor was the reason behind the meeting, but the inheritance agreement had changed her perspective. She did not care about the money or the family name, yet she could not ignore the possibility that thousands of patients and employees could be affected by what happened next. When the elevator doors opened on the executive floor, Amara stepped into a boardroom filled with senior executives, lawyers, investors, and medical directors. At the far end of the table sat Daniel, who immediately recognized her and froze. For years he had believed Amara would never return, and now she was standing in front of him with confidence he had never seen before. Victor sat quietly nearby, looking older and weaker than she remembered. Amara's eyes briefly met his, but she said nothing. Daniel was the first to break the silence. He demanded to know why she had been invited, and accused the lawyers of wasting everyone's time. Mr. Hassan calmly placed the original inheritance agreement on the table and explained that Victor's father had created a legal succession plan decades earlier. The controlling shares of Bello Medical Group were not automatically reserved for Daniel. They were to be transferred to the family member who fulfilled specific requirements related to healthcare knowledge, leadership, integrity, and service to the community. Daniel immediately objected, claiming that he had spent years working inside the company, while Amara had been away building a completely separate career. Mr. Hassan responded by presenting documents showing that Amara had founded multiple successful medical centers, developed affordable treatment programs, and received recognition from independent medical organizations. The board members began reading the reports carefully. Daniel became increasingly frustrated as each document weakened his argument. Then Mr. Hassan announced that the independent medical board had completed its evaluation and found Amara fully qualified to inherit the controlling shares. Daniel stood from his chair and accused Amara of returning only because she wanted the family fortune. Amara remained calm and told him that if money had been her goal, she would have contacted Victor years earlier. She explained that she had built her career without their help and had no desire to take revenge. What concerned her was the condition of the hospitals, the employees who depended on their salaries, and the patients who trusted Bello Medical Group with their lives. Her words surprised several members of the board, especially those who had expected a bitter confrontation. Then Mr. Hassan revealed one final detail from the agreement that could change Daniel's future inside the company, and every person around the table turned toward him. The final revelation from Mr. Hassan changed the atmosphere in the boardroom completely. He explained that the inheritance agreement did not simply transfer the controlling shares to Amara. It also required the existing leadership to undergo an independent review before any major position could continue. Daniel immediately demanded to know what that meant for him, but the lawyers presented financial reports, internal complaints, failed hospital projects, and records showing that several senior employees had resigned because of decisions made under his leadership. Daniel tried to defend himself, insisting that every business experienced difficult periods, but the evidence was too strong to ignore. The board voted to remove him from his executive position while the investigation continued. Daniel looked at Amara with anger, expecting her to celebrate his downfall, but she remained silent. She had spent years imagining what it would feel like to stand in front of her brother after everything he had said to her. Yet now that the moment had arrived, revenge felt empty. Instead, Amara asked the board to focus on the future of the company. She accepted the controlling inheritance, but made it clear that she would not become another distant owner who cared only about profits. She wanted to understand the problems inside the hospitals, so during the following weeks, she visited several facilities without bringing a large team or announcing herself in advance. She spoke directly with nurses, doctors, cleaners, receptionists, and patients. She discovered that some hospitals had outdated equipment, while large amounts of money were being spent on unnecessary administrative costs. She also learned that many employees were afraid to speak honestly, because they believed senior management would punish anyone who criticized the company. Amara changed that immediately. She created confidential reporting systems, reviewed hospital budgets, increased support for medical staff, and expanded programs for patients who could not afford treatment. Her approach quickly improved morale throughout the organization. Even people who had doubted her began to respect her leadership. Meanwhile, Victor watched his daughter transform the company he had spent his entire life building. One afternoon, he asked Amara to meet him privately. He apologized for disowning her and admitted that he had spent years believing Daniel was the only child capable of protecting the family legacy. Victor confessed that he had confused obedience with loyalty and control with love. Amara listened quietly, remembering the night she had left the mansion and waited for her mother to defend her. Victor admitted that Margaret had regretted remaining silent, but by then the damage had already been done. Amara did not pretend that everything could be repaired in one conversation. She told her father that forgiveness would take time, but she no longer wanted anger to control her life. Victor began to cry as he told her that the daughter he once believed had abandoned the family was actually the person who had protected its future. And Amara finally understood that her greatest victory was not inheriting Bello Medical Group, but proving that she could become successful without ever needing anyone's permission.